got nicknamed the Hertamania. Why were you so good there?
It all started at the bottom of the corkscrew. So I was good at getting that really early acceleration and using the compression at the bottom of the corkscrew. And so I could gain a couple mile an hour there. And like you said, then it was almost flat through the left. So whatever you could gain out of the corkscrew, you could kind of carry all the way down the rest of the hill.
Bryan, what's happening?
Hey, Paul, how are you?
I'm doing good. I haven't seen you in a long time.
It has been a minute.
I know. I'm not around the races anymore, so I don't get to run around and see all the old guys that I used to race against. But, you came into the sport really about the same time as me. I was just slightly before you. And, you came in like in the era of there was me and Jimmy and you and Robbie. I mean, it was kind of a time when there was a changing of the guard in kart, where you had all these older established guys, and then all this young guys came in at that time.
That's right. Like I remember like you were always like a year or two ahead of me. And I really remember looking up to you. You were dominating in Indy Lights when I was in the Skip Barber series, and then you. I remember when you got your first shot with Dale Coyne at Long Beach. And I was in Indy Lights at that time. So, it's kind of cool to watch you kind of going through, because you were, like you said, one of the first of the younger guys. We had Mo and Bobby and Little Al and all those guys that had been doing it for quite a long time and were still great, but were getting older. And you were kind of the first of the young bunch really around then that started breaking down some doors, and you coming in and being young and fast, and I think that helped open up a lot of the owners' eyes. Like, hey, maybe we need to get on board with the youth movement now. So I think it was definitely like an interesting time, because all these guys were beloved. Rick Mears, like you think of all these names, and yet here we were all looking for our chance and looking to push our way into the sport. So it's cool.
Hey, it's Paul Tracy. Quick heads up for all you hardcore racing fans. Racers got a killer deal right now. Stream the best in motorsports with Racer Plus and get a full year of Racer Magazine. 6 badass collectible issues, all bundled and discounted. We're talking live WRC, Dakar, Crandon Off-Road, DTM, British Touring Cars, Le Mans, World Superbike, and even the Isle of Man TT. All in one place. Hit up racer.com/bundle and fuel up on all the best racing from around the world. That's racer.com/bundle. Well, let me start out with your stats. You've got 4 IndyCar wins, 10 poles. You were Indy Lights champion, but 2-time Indy 500 wins with as a car owner, which is pretty cool. So, I'm looking back at the beginning of your career. I know you won the Barber Dodge Championship, but did you do any karting before that? Because I really couldn't find anything on karting or Formula Fords or anything like that.
Yeah, so I did quite a bit of karting. I started when I was 12.
Okay.
Out here in Southern California. I still live in Valencia, and so when I was 12, a guy up the street had a go-kart for sale, and I convinced my dad to get it for $700. And we went out to a place out here called Indian Dunes, which was a really cool motocross facility.
Yeah, that's a motocross track.
But they had, on Friday nights, they had a little dirt oval, and they raced go-karts on the dirt oval. And so we went out and started doing that, and that's how I got started. So I did karting until I was 18. I moved into like endurance karting, so go-karts on big tracks. So I raced at Daytona on the road course there. You name it, all the big, Road America, big road courses by the end of my karting thing. And then I moved in the Skip Barber program. So I did their school series and then their pro series, and then Indy Lights and IndyCar. That's kind of was my path through the sport.
So your era back then, so it was the laydown kart you were running?
I did both. I did sit-up sprint, where it was like a sit-up sprint go-kart, just like they run on the short kart tracks. And then I also did a little bit of the laydown enduro stuff, which was kind of really weird. Like you're literally laying down like you're in bed in the
ran
go-kart.
At like Laguna and places like that, Riverside, all that kind of stuff.
Riverside. Yeah, I never ran Laguna. I ran Sears Point, or now Sonoma.
Yeah.
So yeah, all over the place. It's kind of nutty. Like, it's very dangerous as hell. I don't know why my dad let me do that stuff, but we did it.
So were you a junior in that stuff, or did you run senior? Because I follow a lot of those old school guys that ran the laydowns back in those days, like Vince Paleo. I don't know if you know these names, Vince Paleo. You obviously know Ron Emick and all those kind of guys. And like laydown stuff is kind of coming back around again.
Yeah, no, Mark Dismore and a lot of those guys did that stuff, and it was really kind of it was a cool time. Like when I went and did the Daytona race, it was literally the start of Speed Week. So before Bike Week was the kart, so right after New Year's, and like when I did the sit-up sprint, I finished third in the race, and I started 54th out of 135 karts. They did a Le Mans style start.
Yeah.
And your starting position was based on when they received your entry. And back then it was all mail. So I was in California. So by the time the magazine got mailed to my house, I'd fill it out right away and send in my entry with the check. By the time they get it back on the East Coast where they were headquartered, I was always kind of like middle to back of the pack. That was their way to get you to pay your entry fee right away.
That's pretty wild. And so no qualifying. It was mail in where you started when they got your entry.
The order they opened it in. And I guess I thought back now because I actually bumped into, it was the Franklin Zip importer.
Yeah. He's in Milwaukee.
Yeah. And I just bumped into him a couple weeks ago, and he won that race. And I think back at my 17-year-old self, like, why wasn't I smart enough to like find somebody who lived locally and call them and say, hey, put my entry fee, like walk it into the office. So if I hadn't started 54th, I might have won that thing.
This podcast is brought to you by Racer and Racer.com, the leading motorsports news and information source in North America. With special thanks to trusted silver and gold trading partner and studio sponsor ITM Trading, and Scottsdale-based Apex Motor Club. I'm a member there. It's a membership-only private track racing community right here in Phoenix. If you want to go racing, that's the place to be. So, I mean, I know that you were involved heavily in karting pretty much through your whole driving career, because, I mean, a lot of people wouldn't know, but you owned the track in Vegas for quite a while, ran that place, put on a lot of big races, national races out there. And then that track, you had a lease deal with the guy who owned the land, and then the guy didn't want to renew, and it's been all, it got all sideways. But I mean, you've been involved in karting heavily for a long time.
I love karting. I love the sport. I just love racing. And once I kind of like established myself in IndyCar, I had an opportunity. I raced with a guy named Hollis Brown, who you knew Hollis.
Yeah.
He was a promoter. He had a kart shop, and he promoted a lot of big races over his career. And he was aware that this track, which had been built in Vegas, was available. You couldn't own the land, but you could lease the track. And so we did that together, and he ran the facility. I mean, I think you used to have a kart out there a lot, and
I used to go there
laps there.
I used to go all the time when I lived in Vegas.
It was a great track. It was actually designed. There's a track right outside of Le Mans, France, a kart track, and it's actually the blueprint of that track. It's the same layout. Yeah, and so it was a really cool facility, and it was a way just for me to a little bit give back, a little bit be more involved in the sport. And in the back of my mind, I was trying to create a what's next, or what do I want to do with the rest of my life when I'm not racing? And I knew I wanted to stay in racing in some way. So I learned a lot about the business side of racing, be involved in that, which I think all that has helped me a lot, in what I do now in terms of team ownership and all that. So it was an interesting journey. I learned a lot through the whole experience.
Yeah, well, I remember those times, like going out there and going to the big races and, the Super Nationals, and you see some of the guys that came up through that made it either in sports cars or Indy cars, like the AJ Allmendingers and the Patrick Longs and Joey Hands, and like all these kids that kind of came through that Vegas track. It's pretty crazy, like Bommeritos, like all these names that that became big race drivers.
Yeah, Scott Speed. Like you could go on and on. It was a really cool time in the sport, and hard to explain now because I don't know if it really is exactly the same. But like karting was massive at that time. We were turning entries away, and we were plowing fields to make more room for paddock space to have more karts there, and so it was cool to be part of the sport at that era.
Yeah. So getting back to when you started in IndyCar off, like we were talking about, you came in close to the same time as me, and I mean you were a guy that, I mean right away you were quick, and I always thought you were really, really one of those guys who had a lot of one lap qualifying speed. Like you could really put a lap together. Did that come naturally for you? Is it something you had to work at, or is it just something you just naturally had?
I would say that part was like, for me, what was most natural, or what, kind of came easiest. The things that I had to work a lot harder at, race pace, racecraft, I had to work harder at, and especially ovals. That was not natural for me. It took me a long time to kind of get proficient at that, which was tough in that era because you couldn't. It was so competitive then too that you couldn't not be good at everything and really be considered one of those elite guys.
Well, and the consequences were super high then as well. Like the kind of speeds that we were doing in those days, like on super speedways, we're running 235 miles an hour average. You didn't have any, Hans device. There was no safer walls. If you crashed, you were pretty much going to get hurt, for sure.
Yeah. No, it was a different thing, right? It was scary. Like, the super speedways, I was scared going to those places. I think if guys were honest, everybody had a little bit of that. But it was also kind of like an amazing time, right? To drive one of those cars at that speed. Yeah, I remember 252 miles an hour down the back straight at Fontana with the Hanford wing. Got to experience some really incredible things in a race car that, most people will never get to do.
Yeah, I think, I've talked to some guys, and, I think in our era, I think we had a lot more respect for each other, because when you see the guy, you see it now standing on the pit stand, places like Indy, these guys, they drive like maniacs out there. And they're still going damn fast. I just don't know if these guys realize that they, with everything, all the safety innovation, whether they can get hurt or not still.
The consequence was more present for us, wasn't it? Because guys got hurt, and we saw it, every year we saw it happening. So it was, I want to say we had that constant reminder of how on the edge it was, or how at risk it was. And, I wouldn't trade it for what we have now, which is relative safety compared to then. So I think we've made so many advancements, and I think that's a really good thing. But drivers being drivers, if you start feeling a little safer, you're going to push those limits a little more. You could say they don't race each other with as much respect as we did. But I think honestly, if we could have got away with more then, we would have too. So I think it's just a consequence of the sport being safer, which is a good thing. But, now I think we're more in an era of penalties, right? We didn't get a lot of drive-through penalties or blocking or any of that stuff because the consequences were so high. We frankly just didn't do it very much.
Yeah.
Where now, it's kind of the way to race. And so it puts race control more in the forefront. They have to penalize that. Because guys can bounce off each other and everything, and generally kind of keep it going. So I don't know that it's better or worse. The racing's super close now, and it's really exciting. But you wish somehow there was a little bit more of that old school respect. Would be kind of cool.
Yeah, and the cars now, they just seem the car seems so strong that the guys just slam into each other and nothing bends and nothing breaks really. You don't have suspension. Like you would touch somebody in our era and the A-arm would bend and you'd be done, right?
Yeah. It wasn't an option to, feed a guy a wheel because you were probably ending your day too. And now that, you can kind of get away with it. So, like I said, I think there's way more positive than negative in that, but there is a negative consequence that, the guys kind of push those limits a little harder than maybe good, clean, fair racing would wish for.
Yeah. So you were known as the king of Laguna Seca, the qualifying master. You got nicknamed the Hertamania. Why were you so good there? I won there twice, and I never got. It was never PT Mania at Laguna Seca.
Mania?
You won twice. I won twice, but nobody ever called me the master there.
Well, the Hertamania thing was because of David Letterman. He was a partner at Ray Hall, and he coined that. So it picked off because of David and his popularity at the time, which was kind of fun. We had some fun with it. We made little buttons and kind of leaned into it. So that was cool. But I don't know, Laguna was. I felt like road courses were a particular strength for me.
Yeah.
And if I had to pick something that I thought I was really good at, it was carrying a lot of entry speed in the road course corners.
Yeah.
And Laguna, there's a couple tracks. Cleveland was one, but Laguna in particular is a track where if you could kind of carry King Hill entry speed into some of those corners, particularly coming down the hill, there was just lap time in it. And most of the time, I made all my lap time on my teammates from the bottom of the corkscrew until the entry of 11. So coming down the hill, under the bridge, I was just, for whatever reason, good at carrying a lot of speed in. And those corners, the more speed you could carry in, of course, right, a downforce car, if you're going faster, you get a little bit more downforce. And that was, I don't know if it was a secret, but it was what I was maybe more naturally good at.
Yeah, well, there's really only one corner. I mean, as you come out of the corkscrew and then you take the right under the bridge, there was pretty close to flat. And then you had the banked corner, which was kind of like a lift, and there wasn't tons of time to be made there because the corners were super fast. They were like, pretty quick.
It all started at the bottom of the corkscrew. So I was good at getting that really early acceleration and using the compression at the bottom of the corkscrew. And so I could gain a couple mile an hour there. And like you said, then it was almost flat through the left. So whatever you could gain out of the corkscrew, you could kind of carry all the way down the rest of the hill. And once you got that lap time gain, then you could just kind of carry it down the whole hill. And I would keep making lap time all the way through.
Yeah. So
but the funny thing is, then Colton was really good at Laguna and actually won some races there too. And everybody thought, oh, you must have really gave him your secret or told him a trick or anything.
Or was it hereditary? Like what is it about the
I don't know what it is. We talked about Road America. There's some places where I had success that Colton's had success too. There's a lot of commonality to it. But the honest truth is, Colton never once asked me for any driving tip, especially at Laguna Seca, and I never gave him one. So whatever he did or however he figured it out was not to do with me. So maybe there's some heredity, or I don't know what it was, but kind of interesting that I think everybody thought I conceptually knew something about how to drive that track, but it wasn't that at all.
So even in karting, would he ever ask you for your advice, or was he just like, I got this, Dad?
No, like he would, but I always tried to kind of be his dad, not his coach, not his manager, because I wanted to have a normal relationship with him. And when you're a coach or any of that, you kind of got to be a hard ass sometimes, right? You got to kick them in the butt and say, hey, look, you're not doing this right, and you're not paying attention, or you're not, especially when they're younger. So my philosophy was always to get people that I thought were really good and put them around him and let them coach him, nurture him. Like in karting, I sent him over to Italy and he drove with Danilo Rossi, who's a 7-time world champion.
Yeah,
and
he's
just a great guy.
One of the best. And he's a super nice guy too.
Exactly. And I remember we went to Italy and Danilo, we do a practice session, and it's a big race over there. They're all big races in Europe. And Colton was like second quickest in practice, and he was feeling really good about it, and he was happy. And as we're walking back to the tent, and Colton's like 10 years old, 11 years old, and Danilo kind of pulls me inside, and he says, "Hey, do you want me to talk to him like a daddy, or do you want me to talk to him like a driver?" And I said, "Like a driver." So we get back to the tent. I'll never forget this. And Danilo puts a track map in front of 10-year-old or 11-year-old Colton. And he puts this map down, and with a red pen, he starts putting X's. Mistake, 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 mistake. Why so many mistake? And I saw Colton's face turn from, hey, I was second in practice, I'm doing pretty good. And like he's biting his lip, he's a kid, he's trying not to cry. But he respected Danilo in a different way than he would have respected me. If I had done that to him, it would have been, I don't know, a little cruel as a dad. You know what I mean? So,
well, I mean, we've heard all the stories about how Max was with, or Yas was with Max. He was a total hard ass on his son and coaching him, right?
Right. And, I guess everybody navigates those relationships differently, but I didn't want to be that to Colton.
Yeah.
I wanted to still be his dad. So we talk. He asks me advice, but particular driving tips. Hey, do you think I should brake later for turn 4? That was just never part of our kind of repartee. He was more globally like, I don't know what's going on, or I feel like I'm not doing this. I'll talk him through, well, is the back end secure under braking? I'll try and help him figure out what he needed to get faster. But in terms of driving coaching, I never did that for him, and that was never our relationship.
Well, also during that time when he was karting, when he was a kid, you were racing full time in kart,
right?
And in the IRL when he was still, racing karts. I mean, probably you weren't there a lot. So, like, how did you manage that situation of his racing? Was it? I guess I know your wife went to pretty much everything with, but you had to place him with people mechanics and driver coaches.
I did a lot of the work myself, and I would go to the races when I could. But like if I had a race, I was doing a race myself, I'd work on the carts during the week. I'd load the trailer on Wednesday night at our house. I would get on a plane Thursday morning to go to my race. And Friday morning, Jeanette, she would drive the trailer to the go-kart track, and we'd have a mechanic that he worked with meet there, and he would park the trailer and unload it, and they would go racing like that. And I would go racing myself, and that was what we did.
So now, I mean, obviously you say that, Colton didn't come to you a lot for advice, but only sometimes you would ask for advice. I mean, you ran his radio for a little while. I don't know if you still run his radio now or
No,
you guys had a couple.
I got to do that for a couple of years, which was awesome.
Yeah, but a few times he got upset and would like start freaking out on the radio. And I remember, because I was calling the races then, and we would listen in, and you would just be like, "Yeah, okay, we're gonna pit in 5 more laps," or something. You just like blow off his like he'd have a freak out on the radio, and you'd be like, "Yeah, you're doing good laps, so pitting in 5 laps."
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was right. I never took it personally because at that point, right, it's not a son talking to a father. It's a driver talking to his team, to a strategist. So yeah, people didn't get that. The reality is, like, he's never in his life spoken to me like that without a helmet on. He knows better. And we've never had a fight. We don't argue like that. I mean, we disagree on things. But what they hear on the radio, they imagine that, he comes home late and is yelling at me like that, or they take it as like a disrespectful thing, but it's not that. It's all in context of he's got a helmet on, he's frustrated, and there's only one person you can vent that to in that moment. That's the guy on the other end of the radio. So I always took it as that, and I never got offended or upset about it. And if anything, I liked to think that him hearing me on the other end of that radio was calming or helpful for him.
Yeah. So like, you didn't want to be, why did you guys end the relationship on like you calling his races? Was it just time for a change?
So ultimately, um, why I moved off of Colton's radio was the Andretti guys thought it was going to be a better move. They thought it would be better to not have that distraction and not have that be part of the story. It wasn't something Colton or I wanted, but we also understood that it was almost like a weekly thing at that point of, clips of Colton and I on the radio. And it wasn't where we wanted to focus people's attention either. So we didn't, the team said, we think this would be better. And we said, okay. And we just went with it. And that's why it ultimately ended. I was a little sad about that, but also I was fine because I never want to be in a position where people are crediting Colton's success to me or vice versa, right? It's important to him that he has his own thing. He has his own identity separate from me. And I want that for him.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've been with Andretti now a long time and you've been calling races for a long time with a lot of different drivers. And it seems like they always seem to place you with either a guy who needs a calming influence or a newer driver coming in. Do you act as well, not only calling the races, but are you like also driver coaching, like giving advice to the guys that are new coming in?
So I would say not necessarily driver coaching, like in terms of when I hear driver coaching, I think, hey, we need to work on entry speed in turn 4 or specifics like that. I think I have more of a holistic 30,000 foot view approach. I'm not getting into the specifics of it, but more, hey, like just trying to, if I think like with Kyle, right, it's easy for me to talk about if I feel like, he's distracted or what's going on, or, hey, we haven't qualified well at the last few ovals. We really need to focus on, qualifying this week, and let's put our energy into trying to make sure that we can start up further in the grid or whatever it is. So that, yes, I think I've just been put not necessarily with somebody that needed that, but just where they thought I could do the most good, and I enjoy that. I like working with all the different drivers. I have a lot of respect for them because I've kind of been there, and I can recognize, especially like with Kyle, like some of the guys I've worked with, when you see drivers that can do something that you couldn't, and that's kind of cool to be able to understand maybe in a different way than I did when I was driving what makes the good guys great and the great guys exceptional. So I like all of that. There's not a driver I work with that I didn't enjoy the process of.
Yeah. So you've got a new guy coming in now with a ton of experience,
Willie P,
and a ton of speed, and a guy who knows how to win. Like, is the team excited about having him come in? Like what level he's going to bring to up the team?
Very, very excited about Will Power joining. It's going to be interesting because we have really good chemistry between Colton and Kyle and Marcus on the team. They all got along well. They fed off each other, but obviously super competitive with one another. And now Will coming in, it's a different dynamic because, right, here's a guy who's got, 71 or 2 pole positions, his championships, Indy 500 wins. He's got a level of success and a little bit of gravitas that comes with that. That's going to change the dynamic within the team. And I think that'll be a positive. I think I'm not expecting he's going to come in and, pull Kyle aside and coach him or help him. But I think his leadership by example, and a guy who's been there, done that, achieved, Kyle and even Marcus, who's a little more experienced. But, I learned the most out of the most successful teammates I had. The best teammates I had were the fastest ones and the most accomplished ones. And I learned more from them than anybody because, their process, their approach yields results. And so the more you can feed off of that or absorb that, the better.
Yeah, I mean, Will is still very, very competitive, and we just had him on the show, and he's still very focused on wanting to be the team leader, the fastest guy on the team. And if he's not, he's like, he doesn't like that situation. So, you know, he's been in situations where he's had ultra fast teammates, and, you know, obviously Kyle is super fast and Marcus is fast, but he's also steady and consistent, you know, so it's going to be an interesting dynamic to see how he integrates into your guys' team.
Yeah, we're excited to see. You know, it's a good benchmark for us, right? We know how competitive Will's been in a Penske Chevy, and we're curious when he hops in one of our cars, what he's going to say. You know, if he's think our cars are terrible compared to that, I don't think that's what he'll say. I think he's going to like certain aspects. I think there's things that our cars are better at than maybe the Penske cars, but there's things that I think the Penske cars are probably doing better than us right now. So the goal is to try and, you know, learn from that and maybe be better at the things he's better at.
If you like this show, hit the like and subscribe button at the bottom, and drop us a comment if you want any guests, special guests. Let us know who you want, and we'll try to get them on. Let's get back to Colton and this now decision. Did you have a lot of input on Colton going to F1? I mean, I know that this was one of his, he said this is one of his goals since he was a kid, that he's wanted to get to F1, but he's an established star in IndyCar, the highest paid driver. I mean, this is a big risk, right?
It is. It is. So we obviously talked about it a lot, he and I. It's all his decision. It's his career. I try and just help him figure out what he wants to do more than tell him what he should do. But I'm really proud of him for the decision he's made. And this comes back to, like, when he was that kid in karting, he wanted to be a Formula One driver. Mm-hmm. And when he was 13 and came to me and said, I want to go to Europe to race because I want to try and get to F1. And I think that's how I have to do it. And he moved to Europe. And, you know, he had not quite turned 14. And Jeanette and I, his mom, we got on a plane with him to England. And I remember driving to the airport, and he was sitting in the back seat of the car. And he made some comment about, you know, what are you going to do with my room? Because he was moving over there. He was going to live with a family, race full time. I had my own driving career. We had other kids. Like, we couldn't move over with him. And my wife said, what do you mean? You're going to come back home? And Colton said, well, no, I'm not. And he thought he was leaving forever at 13. He thought he was never coming home. I remember my wife started bawling because that was not her plan. And this, like, him moving to Europe, that it was none of our plans. It was always him. So, you know, to have that kind of, I guess, desire to do it, even at that age, and he did F4, and then he did the Euro Formula F3. And frankly, we got to a point where the next step financially was going to be really tough. And he had an opportunity to come home and do Indy Lights with Steinbrenner Racing behind him and get in an Andretti car. And at that point, you know, it was just the best option available. So, but, you know, he was giving up a little bit on the F1 dream, but it never died for him. And over the years, it seems like every year there's been a rumor or some interest. And that was kind of nice. It just kind of kept it going, but it never panned out. So when Dan Towers approached him with this plan, originally, like, you know, he just wanted I want to race for Cadillac F1. I want to get in the car and race. And, you know, we've seen a lot of IndyCar drivers then go to Formula One and have, you know, other than Jacques Villeneuve, very limited. You know, it's hard to find a lot of good examples of guys who've gone that direction and been able to make it work. But one of the things that Jacques did was, you know, back then there was kind of unlimited testing. I remember he went over and he did 10,000 kilometers of testing in that Williams before they even raced. That's not an option anymore. You can't test. And so Dan really laid out a program where, you know, if you're going to do it, I want to give you every chance to be successful. So that looks like testing in a 2-year-old F1 car. You're allowed to test in 2-year-old cars. So they can go all over Europe and test in a 2-year-old car. that looks like going to the Grand Prix with the team and doing some FP1s on race weekends. And then really, if you say, okay, those are the two cornerstones of preparing, it takes IndyCar or anything else off the table, because you can't do both those things at such a time commitment. But what he could still do to race is race in F2, which on one hand is a step down in a category. It's a junior category coming out of IndyCar, which is clearly not. But if you look at it as in the body of everything he's trying to do, it's standing starts, it's racing on the tracks, it's racing at Monaco and Baku and all these places that you wouldn't get to drive on. It's racing on Pirelli tires, which are really unique, and you have to drive them very differently than the Firestones he's used to. And yeah, so he still had the dream, and he's, willing to risk it all. And it is a big risk. I'm very proud of him, though, because he said it. The easy thing would have been nobody pushed him out. He could have stayed in IndyCar, and he loves IndyCar. He isn't looking to escape from IndyCar, but this is probably his last, but also his best chance to try and make the F1 dream happen.
Yeah.
And he's gonna dive in. In his mind, he's not done racing IndyCar. He'll be back. Hopefully later on, hopefully a lot later on. But I look at it as doing the uncomfortable thing, doing the hard thing it's admirable, because you're risking it all and you're chasing a dream. And I think people can connect and understand it on that basis.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's got to first get the super license points before he can race in an F1 car. And that's, I mean, a lot of people that are probably listening don't understand how that all works. I understand it's a political thing. Why a winner in IndyCar isn't qualified to race an F1 car is it's kind of silly, really. But what's the first step for him to achieve those the points that he needs, and how many points does he need to get the super license?
So, there's a super license point system in place, and it's designed around putting people through the European feeder series, F4, F3, F2. Those championships pay a lot more super license points to drivers. IndyCar, because it's not an official FIA championship, and it's not designed to be a feeder in F1, it has a lesser points level, and it's a super competitive series. But we've never looked at it as whether it's fair or right. And honestly, it doesn't matter whether it is or not. What matters is that there's a process in place, and he has 35 points today. So he can get his super license just by doing 5 FP1s next year. And he'll probably do that. So the super license question could be answered. He's not doing F2 to get his super license. He's doing F2 because it's part of what he can do next year to fully build out his experience and fully learn and commit himself to that. He's already going to be at those weekends with the Formula One team observing. So it just made sense to make that part of what he's doing.
So have you guys got a team picked out yet for F2? Like, because I've heard, the cars are spec, the engine's spec, the tires spec for that series, and I've heard there's like anything, there's good teams and there's average teams and there's not so good teams. So obviously Cadillac F1 is going to really, I want to say, place him where they think he should be. And I think they've identified the team, and they're working through contracts now to where he'll race in F2 next year. I think that's been decided. But again, right, he's kind of under their control management. He's basically throwing himself 100% into this and saying, I want a shot, and I'm willing to do everything that you tell me you want to see me do. I'll go do it, and I'll try and excel at it. I'm not going to come in with a attitude of, well, it's F2 and I should dominate. Or he'll be evaluated by the Cadillac F1 team based on how he does in the testing program, based on how he does in FP1s in their simulator, how he integrates with the team. That's what they're going to base it on. F2 is
a chance to gain more experience, to learn tracks, to work with the Pirelli tires, and just drive as much as he possibly can next year.
Well, let's get back to some of your driving and his. Like you got to get behind the wheel of your, what was it, your 99 car or 2000 car at Laguna?
Yeah,
and Colton got to drive the cars. Were you in shape for that, or were you like hanging on for dear life?
I was dying. So I didn't do well in the car. I was really mad about it. So for those that don't know, Colton, on his own and without any knowledge of me, went out and found the car that I won my first IndyCar race in, which was that 98 Reynard that it was owned by a dentist down in Texas that had bought it right after the season. So it was complete. It was as he had purchased it.
Motor, everything?
It had a motor, everything. Wow. So it was a runner. And so Colton bought it, but it had been sitting forever. So he bought it and brought it up to Indy and basically called me over to my shop, said, hey, we got to film something for the team, made some BS excuse, and got me over there. And like I walked in and the car was there, and like he gave it to me as a gift. And I was so taken aback, like never could have imagined. And like I'm not like a sentimental, like I want to own my first win car.
Yeah.
But it's obviously special. But what's really special is that Colton bought it for me. So shortly thereafter, I cooked up this idea. Well, I want to surprise him now. And I'm going to get it. I thought, well, it comes as a runner. We'll take it up to Laguna Seca and I'll surprise him at Laguna on Thursday and we'll both kind of do some laps in it. Well, it turned into I think I spent more getting in condition to run than he spent buying it. But we did. We took it to Laguna Seca and Gamebridge did a really cool throwback livery design as a surprise for him. So they painted his car that weekend like my shell car. And we got to drive it. I drove it. They just repaved the track and I knew I wasn't in great shape, but man, I couldn't make it through a whole lap. I had to, not pushing, not 10/10ths, and not that my 10/10ths now, but I got to drive it and I got to feel it and experience it. It was really fun. But even better, I got to watch Colton drive my old Indy car.
So who did you have rebuild the car and prep it? Because the car being that old, I mean, it would have had to have all new fuel lines and oil lines and everything would have turbos gone through and everything, wheel bearings redone. And like you'd have to rebuild the whole car.
It had an engine. And so I thought, we'll just fire it up. Well, and those valve springs, if you don't clock the engine, like once a month, you gotta just crank the engine over to get the valve springs moving. Otherwise the steel hardens. And so first thing I did is I called some of my old guys over from Cosworth, Kenny Deagle, and some of the guys that actually worked on my Indy car. And I said, hey, we want to fire this thing up. And he goes, it will immediately spit out all the valve springs if it hasn't been clocked every month. So I had to go find a guy who had a running Cosworth XB engine. And so we had to borrow an engine, do everything to the car. And it was a combination of the guys at my Bryan Herta Autosport team did a lot of the work. But then we had a lot of people who really volunteered to help out to get that car running. And in most cases, there were people that I worked with back in that era or worked on that car. We even had my crew chief, Larry Ellert, was out, Alan Creamer, one of my mechanics, you name it. Like, we had a lot of people involved that were part of that car when it won at Laguna. So it was one of those kind of bucket list lifetime moments that it was very meaningful to me.
Well, I know I watched it on TV, and I know Colton got after it. So was he pretty impressed with, like, was he like, wow, you guys are like,
yeah. Well, like in terms of lap times, the cars weren't a lot different than what they are now, but we made the lap time a lot differently, right? We had more power. It was a lighter car, a little more horsepower. So he loved the lightness and the nimbleness of that car, you know, compared to now with the Halo and the hybrid. You know, the cars handle really well and actually get through the corners better than we did. But in terms of driving enjoyment, I think to get to experience something from that era and something really different, he had a great time. He enjoyed it a lot. He stopped him because he was starting to enjoy it too much.
So what
like
do you?
I wanted to keep that car together.
Yeah, what do you do with the car now? Where do you keep it?
So it's in my shop in Brownsburg where we run our Hyundai IMSA program out of, and it's right in the lobby. And what's kind of cool is my business partner Sean Jones actually owns the car that Colton won in his first IndyCar race at Coda. So it's in the shop. So his first win and my first win are right in the lobby, sitting right next to each other.
So you'll keep it ready as a runner if you ever want to get in again.
I never want to drive it again. I was so disappointed with my performance. And then he drove it. So to me, again, like I love the poeticness of he gave it to me, and he's the last one that ever drove the car. I think that's kind of a cool thing. I don't want to mess with that.
Yeah. So I mean, you've got an IndyCar team. You've had a sports car team for a while with Hyundai, and now you're venturing now into LMP2 in 2026. So tell me about that new program. How did that all come about?
Well, you know, we've been really fortunate to have this, you know, long-term relationship now with Hyundai in IMSA and sports car racing. And we really want to grow that team, and we want to move into WeatherTech. It's no secret that the Genesis brand is entering GTP racing. And we've been lobbying really hard to get a chance to be able to run that program. And they haven't decided, so I don't know if we're going to get to do that or not, but it's something I want to do as the next step for our team. And we needed to basically grow our program. So we bought a shop this year, a big shop in Brownsburg, and we've done a partnership deal with Bobby Orgel and the PR1 Matheson Group in LMP2, and basically they're going to move into our shop, and we're going to add more resource to the program. We're going to really start building out our engineering department specifically, but mechanics and things too, and basically start getting ourselves ready for a bigger WeatherTech program, whether that be the Genesis thing or something else. But it's kind of the direction, the trajectory we're on now.
Yeah. Well, with all of this on your plate, how are you going to have time to go see your son race in Formula One? Are you just going to have to is your wife Jeanette going to have to go and watch her like the karting days?
Yeah. I mean, essentially it's back, you know, it's funny. It's kind of full circle where I just won't get to very much. Yeah, I've looked, luckily their season starts before IndyCar, and there's a few weekends that I can make work. But yeah, I won't be able to do that as much as I would have liked to. I'll miss that. I feel so lucky getting to have worked with Colton in IndyCar, even when I was not his radio, right? We're all in the same engineering trailer. I got to spend so much time with him these last few years that, you know, dads will get that, right? Like your adult children, you don't get that time with them anymore. But because we worked together, I was with him a lot, you know, and a lot of times he'd be like, hey, you know, Dad, you want to go grab some dinner and stuff? And I cherish all that time with him. It's even, I have an adult daughter, and I wish I got, you know, I don't have that kind of a thing with her where I've been able to spend as much time. And I'm lucky, but I'm also proud and looking forward to kind of just cheering for him, being, you know, just being a parent there, a race dad, and watching what he does with this opportunity.
Well, it's been great catching up with you and finding out what's going on with you and your teams and your son. And I want to thank you for coming on.
I appreciate it. You got to come out. You know, we haven't seen you, Paul. You come out to a track. Come hang out sometime.
I've been training and training. I'm supposed to be doing the 8 hours of Indy. So,
okay.
Yeah. Wait, I'll be out in Indy hopefully in the next month or so.
We'll look forward to seeing you back on track.
All right. Thanks, Bryan.